happen. Let's speak with Martin Beck, Chief Economist at WPI Strategy. Good afternoon to you, Martin. I mean, we did have an idea of what it was going to look like. In that respect, were there any surprises for you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. I think, as you say, all of the measures in the budget were leaked in advance or preempted, so they didn't come as a surprise. I think what was surprising was the size of the so-called fiscal black hole. So before the budget, we'd been warned that the Chancellor might have to raise taxes by 20, 30, 40 billion pounds to fill this black hole, to achieve her fiscal rules. In the event, the OBR gave her a break. The OBR thinks that the nature of what limited growth we'll get in the economy over the next few years will be more tax rich. So each pound of GDP will generate more tax revenues. And as a result, the margin that she had to fill was much smaller than expected. So the fiscal position is a bit more resilient now, though, but as you've been talking about earlier, it does mean even more tax rises and the tax burden heading to the highest on record.
What is it all dependent on? We were talking to David Buick, a little name I'm sure you're familiar with, who also made this point about fiscal headroom and the like. But of course, other circumstances have to come into play, both nationally and internationally.
That's right, and bear in mind, public spending by the end of the decade will be £1.5 trillion.
Is that all?
So even a small change in growth or inflation or interest could even though the Chancellor's got more of a margin against her fiscal rules now, that margin could easily be eroded just by a small change in some of the OBR's assumptions around the economy.
Is there an irredeemable reality, though, about spending in this country, Martin? I mean, the welfare budget is the obvious example. I mean, we could go through the departments one by one if we wanted to, but that particular area, which looks to be, in fact, some would claim, as a matter of fact, is completely unsustainable going forward. It simply cannot, it has to, it's just the law of mathematics, it has to implode at some point.
In a dynamic economy, we want to be lowering taxes on workers rather than raising them. And at the moment, we're raising taxes on workers and transferring that money to people on the welfare budget, other the welfare budget. And as you said, I don't think that's sustainable in the long run, but you can do a lot of damage to an economy before things get so bad that you need radical change. And unfortunately, I think we're in a position now where things aren't bad enough, where things are just about sustainable and tolerable to avoid the need to do anything dramatic or radical.
And of course, it's all about confidence, isn't it? I mean, confidence is always key to any economy. If there is a sense that the wobbles have taken hold, then everybody starts running for the hills, whether it's banks or industry. People cut employing people because they're a bit concerned. House prices do strange things. And of course, with this, we did have tax rises within this. I mean, they happen in that kind of sneaky threshold sort of way, but they are nonetheless, if you're somebody who's suddenly thinking, well, I'm going to earn a few more quid, yep, you might, but you could be one of the 780,000 people that have now been introduced to income tax. You could be one of the 920,000 people that have just been introduced to a higher tax rate. As far as all those people are concerned, that's a tax rise.
Of course, and higher taxes, look, they're a bad thing for the economy. As you kind of imply, they damage incentives. They damage the ability or desire to, get promoted, get a pay rise, start a business. So, the money from these tax rises is going to someone else. Ultimately, it will stay in the economy. But I think there's an efficiency cost to raising taxes more and more. And we're beginning to see the consequences of that now. We've got very sluggish growth. The OBR's forecast for growth for the next few years is very weak, and higher taxes aren't going to help that.
Indeed. If we look back to July last year, remember July the 4th, of course, 411 new Labour MPs all pitched up in Westminster with their newly polished shoes and their excited faces. And then it was a week or two later, Rachel Reeves came out with some very grim news. She'd gone all archaeological bound on the spreadsheets and the books and discovered there was 22 billion quid that had gone amiss, and she needed to fill this big fiscal black hole. That, of course, is now, grown a little more, and depending on who you listen to will depend on which figure you believe. Has this budget done anything to alleviate that? Because that was always central. It's almost like a mantra, the 22 billion back, or the 30 billion, whatever it happened to be. Can Rachel Reeves now address this as a direct result of this budget, Martin?
I think in some respects that the margin of safety she's got against the fiscal rules is now bigger than it was in March, for example. It's now 20 billion rather than 10. But as we were saying earlier, £20 billion sounds like a lot of money, but when you're spending £1.5 trillion, that margin could be easily eroded. So the fear, I guess, is that in 6 months or a year's time, she'll be coming back with more tax rises. You know, are we in a fiscal doom loop where we're destined for ever more tax increases, weaker economy, weaker public finances, etc.?
And where do you sense we sit internationally? Because these constant references to G7, I've had a couple of sort of Labour guests mention it this afternoon. You know, things are tough, but you know, it's not as tough as some countries out there. Where do we sit sort of on the international league table, as it were? Are we Wolves or are we Arsenal?
I think we're in the middle of the league, probably. Like all the major European economies are very sluggish, they're very stagnant, they've got fiscal problems. On the other hand, you've got the US, which, okay, it's borrowing a lot of money, but it's very dynamic, it's growing quickly, it's getting energy prices down. There's an attitude there that it would be good if we could try and adopt. But I think as things stand, with taxes going up and this endless focus on the public finances and fiscal black holes, we're a long way from emulating the United States.
Yeah, it hasn't made you rethink your career as an economist, has it, Martin? I mean, you'll be howling at the moon at this rate with this kind of news.
I think it's always good. It's always good for us when there's a lot of uncertainty in the air. And I think carry on with that for some time.
Indeed. We will talk again soon. Martin, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Martin Beck, Chief Economist at WPI Strategy. Thank you to him.